boyfriend's mom kept calling his ex the one that got away. Sometimes the hardest part of a relationship isn't being lied to, and it isn't jealousy. It's realizing that the person you're with is carrying a shadow from the past, one that they never quite leave behind. I didn't understand this at first. At the beginning, everything felt simple. Quiet evenings, the smell of coffee lingering in the air, the kind of gaze that seemed certain, steady. Life felt easy, and I believed I'd found someone I could trust completely. But then she entered our lives, not directly, but like a ghost, like an echo that refused to fade. Not her herself, but the memory of her, stitched into the way he smiled, the way he paused at certain stories, and most painfully, in the words his mother said. The first time I truly felt it was during dinner at his parents' house. A normal evening, or so it seemed. The aroma of baked bread, the faint tick of the wall clock, the warmth of photographs lining the living room walls. And then, as if floating between the stories of his childhood and the casual laughter, she was mentioned. She always was such a clever girl, his mother said. I didn't know who she meant, but the words cut through the air like a sharp breeze. I felt it immediately, a small, invisible weight pressing into my chest. Something unspoken lingered there, in the way his hand didn't quite squeeze mine at that moment, and in the way his eyes quickly dropped to his plate. From that evening on, I noticed the pattern. His mother didn't mention her often, but when she did, it was always in a way that made me feel temporary, like a shadow that could be dismissed at any moment. I realized I was being compared not subtly, not once, but constantly reminded of the girl he should have married, the one who supposedly slipped away. I began to see it in every smile, every laugh that seemed too loud, every sigh he let escape when he thought I wasn't watching. I wasn't just his girlfriend, I was a replacement, and his mother made sure I never forgot it. The days started blending together, each visit feeling heavier than the last. I'd entered their home with a forced smile, and by the time I left, my heart ached with a strange mixture of resentment and sorrow. I kept asking myself, was I imagining it? Was I overreacting? But deep down, I knew the truth. I was living in a space that had already been occupied, a space where another woman's memory had been etched into every corner. Even at home, in the quiet moments when we were alone, I felt it lingering. Sometimes I would watch him, hoping to catch a sign that he truly loved me, that he had moved on. But there was always a hesitation, a trace of nostalgia in his eyes that I couldn't erase, no matter how much I tried. And I realized that love isn't always enough. Sometimes the past isn't a memory, it's a presence that refuses to leave. I started keeping mental notes of every subtle remark, every fleeting glance, every sigh that didn't belong to the present. I found myself imagining the girl he should have married as a perfect version of everything I wasn't. The image haunted me, more vivid than reality, yet impossible to confront directly. It wasn't malicious. It was simply there, a constant, unyielding benchmark against which I was measured. Every visit, every interaction, became a subtle test I never asked for. It wasn't outright cruelty, nothing so obvious, but it was there, lurking in the pauses, in the faint inflections of her voice, in the stories she told that always seemed to highlight her in ways that left me invisible. At family dinners, she would reminisce about the days when he was younger, the way he laughed at her jokes, the games they played together. And I sat there quietly, aware that I was being measured against a memory I could never touch. I tried to remind myself that this wasn't about me, that perhaps she simply loved him in a way that couldn't be explained, that her words weren't intended to hurt. But the truth seeped into my bones, small and persistent, whispering that I was not enough, not the one he had imagined, not the girl he should have married. I began noticing the subtle ways in which their lives were intertwined with the past. Family photos that included her, letters or cards carefully kept in drawers, small anecdotes repeated over and over as if to anchor her existence in the present. Every mention, every fleeting memory, became a reminder that I was always chasing a phantom. At first I tried to speak to him about it, carefully, quietly, hoping to find reassurance in his words. But the conversations would stall, falter. He would nod, promise me that I was the one he loved, that I was all that mattered, yet in the same breath, he would recount something about her, always with a soft smile, a trace of longing that I could neither confront nor erase. And slowly, I understood. He wasn't lying. He did love me, but love, I realized, could coexist with nostalgia. And sometimes nostalgia was stronger than the present. It became unbearable during small family gatherings. His mother would casually compare me to her, highlighting traits she admired or lamented. She always knew exactly what to say, she would remark, and I felt myself shrinking, an invisible guest in her carefully curated memory. I began to notice the little ways I changed around her, subconsciously adjusting my voice, my laughter, even my posture, in a futile attempt to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the quiet ache in my chest never left. I stopped expecting genuine comfort from him during these moments. Instead, I became hyper-aware, noting every look, every hesitation, every phrase that reminded me that my place was never quite permanent. I wondered how someone could love another while holding a part of their heart elsewhere, and yet, there it was. a constant tug between past and present. I started retreating inward, keeping my emotions carefully locked away. I would smile, nod, and laugh when necessary, but beneath the surface, I was learning to carry the weight of someone else's memory. And I began to see a truth that terrified me. Love, in its quietest form, is not always enough to bridge the chasms that the past digs into our hearts. Even in solitude, the echoes followed me. I would lie awake at night, imagining conversations that never happened, rewriting moments where I could have been enough, where I could have been the one he never let go of. The memory of her was not a ghost of cruelty. It was simply a presence, tangible in its permanence, leaving me with the stark understanding that some stories are never fully ours. The more I tried to assert myself, the more I realized that I was fighting a battle I could not win. No amount of love, no amount of devotion could erase the echoes of someone who had already claimed a part of his world, and yet I stayed, clinging to fragments of him that were real, fragments that belonged to me. Each smile, each touch, each quiet confession of care became both a balm and a knife, soothing me while reminding me that I was always, in some way, second. I began to see the patterns in their interactions more clearly. His mother would casually bring up the one that got away in front of mutual friends, as if testing the waters, as if daring me to feel inadequate. Every time she spoke, I felt a flicker of anger, of desperation, followed by a wave of exhaustion. The weight of constant comparison was suffocating. And in those moments, I began to ask the questions I had been avoiding. Was he truly free to love me entirely? Could I ever be enough when another's memory loomed so large in our lives? Even small gestures became laden with meaning. A wistful glance at a photograph, a mention of a shared memory, a soft sigh while recounting a story from years ago. They all carried the weight of someone else's claim. And slowly I began to see the cracks in our love. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he could not fully leave behind a past that had been shaped by another. I started to withdraw, silently observing, learning to navigate a delicate minefield. Each step, each word had to be measured, because anything careless could ignite the quiet but relentless comparisons. I loved him, and I wanted to believe that love could survive, could conquer the shadows. But the more I tried, the clearer it became that some shadows are too heavy to lift, no matter how strong the heart. I reached the point where every visit, every conversation, every quiet moment became a test of endurance. The subtle remarks, the comparisons, the lingering nostalgia, everything sharpened like a knife pressed against my ribs. I realized that I had been trying to live in a house haunted by someone who was no longer there, and yet whose presence was undeniable. One evening, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, watching him laugh softly at something his mother said. I tried to join in, to feel included, to anchor myself in the present. But the laughter felt distant, almost hollow, like a reflection on water I could never reach. That was the moment I understood. No amount of closeness, no amount of devotion could erase a past that was actively preserved, cherished and spoken of as if it were still alive. The truth hit me with quiet force. I loved him, truly, deeply, but I had been competing with a memory, not a person. And no matter how much he cared, no matter how genuine his feelings, I could not fill the space that had already been claimed. The realization was neither angry nor dramatic. It was calm, almost cold, yet it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every forced smile, every silent pang of inadequacy. I began to see the world differently, through a lens of painful clarity. Love alone does not erase the past. It does not undo the weight of memory, the claims of those who shaped someone before you. And sometimes love is not enough, not because it is weak, but because the past is unrelenting, and some wounds never truly close. I stayed that evening, not moving, not speaking. I let the quiet settle around me, and I felt a strange sense of acceptance. I could not change the way things had been. I could not rewrite the memories that lingered in his mother's voice or in the spaces he carried them. I could only observe, and in that observation, I found a reluctant freedom. Freedom did not come with triumph. It came with understanding. I understood that my love was real, that my presence mattered, but that some spaces are never fully ours. I could exist alongside memory, but I could not erase it. And in that knowledge, I found the quiet, fragile strength to let go, not physically, not immediately, but within my own heart. The coming days were a delicate dance of proximity and distance. I smiled when necessary, laughed when expected, and offered kindness where it was due. But inwardly, I held a silent boundary, a line drawn between myself and the weight of the past. I loved him, but I no longer sought to replace a memory. I no longer tried to be the girl he should have married. I simply existed in the truth of our imperfect present. It was not closure. It was not victory. It was a quiet, unwavering acknowledgement that some love is beautiful, yet incomplete, that some hearts are shared with ghosts, and that sometimes the most courageous act is to recognize your own limits without resentment. In the end, I learned that the heart is vast enough to hold both love and sorrow, to carry devotion alongside the ache of inevitability. And while I remained quietly tethered to him in small ways, I also allowed myself to be untethered in the most essential sense. I understood that life does not always provide the happy ending we hope for, and that sometimes survival is found in acceptance and observation and in the delicate art of letting go. And so I watched. I listened. I loved in my own measured way, aware that some parts of life are not ours to control. The memory of the girl he should have married remained indelible, but I no longer allowed it to define my worth. I became a silent witness to a story that was not mine, yet still somehow I belonged within its margins. And so I watched. I listened. I loved in my own measured way, aware that some parts of life are not ours to control. The memory of the girl he should have married remained indelible, but I no longer allowed it to define my worth. I became a silent witness to a story that was not mine, yet still, somehow, I belonged within its margins. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Tale Hub for more stories that touch the heart and stir the soul. Your time means everything, and we're grateful you shared it with us.